All right, Barrister Andrew Lawani is a legal luminary. Well, of course, an expert in his own right. As far as the legal profession is concerned, he's already seated with us here, and he will help us have a better understanding as to what implication, all right, it will portend, not just for our body policy, but I mean for the economy generally, how that the Supreme Court gave a ruling, all right, and then the president also gave his own statements that some would say seems to have contradicted or is not in line with what the Supreme Court has decided. They say the Supreme Court, of course, is the apex court in the land, and everything should stop at the doorstep of the Supreme Court. We don't know. With what is on the ground now, we don't know if that is still the case. We also have an economic analyst who has joined us via Zoom. Dr. Osaze Iyuha is his name. Dr. Osaze, please, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you very well, Mr. James. Good afternoon.
Yes, good afternoon. So, yesterday, a figure came through from the NBS that the current inflation rate in the country has also added another figure. So, giving us 17-year high. So, we now have the highest inflation rate in the country now, at the highest level in 17 years. Even though the CBN told us that one of the reasons of several other reasons why they came up with this policy in the first instance is to see how they can use it to curb inflation. I don't know with this latest figure how that has actually contradicted this CBN policy, but I want to start off with the legal tussle already on the ground now, because that is where the heat of the matter is. Barrister Andrew Lawani, quickly help us understand. I don't know, is the third arm of the government, they call them the judiciary, right?
Yes.
And the Supreme Court represent that organ of government.
Very well.
Is that organ still independent with what we have on the ground?
Well, good afternoon, viewers. We are in a very critical situation in Nigeria now, and I believe that people are leading us, should lead us well, so that we not run into anarchy. We have three arms of government: the legislature, the executive, and the judiciary. Both, they are independent of each other. And so, from what we are seeing now, it's as if the executive is trying to trample on the powers of the judiciary.
We are talking the president here.
Yes. The president is above the law. Supreme Court is the apex court in the land. And it is very sacrosanct. Once a court makes an order, whether wrongly or rightly, that order stands to be obeyed by all, including Mr. President, until that order is set aside. Mr. President cannot, by a pronouncement, as it were, like he did on Thursday, yesterday, purport to have set aside the order of the Supreme Court. The order was that an interim injunction restraining the defendants from implementing the new Naira notes, as it were, pending the hearing of the motion of notice. The question now is, has that motion of notice been heard? The question and the answer is no. And so the president cannot, as it were, use his pronouncement or his address to the nation purport to have set aside that order. It is content of court, as it were. So the order of court is sacrosanct, is binding. Until that order is set aside, the order remains valid.
So really, I mean, how will the judiciary now, how will they react to the fact that, okay, the president has set aside this and made his own pronouncements? How exactly will this arm of government react now with what we have now?
The court has in itself inherent powers. I am not a judge. They know what to do when an order of court is disobeyed, as in this instance. Because the pressure trying to be created is that when an order is made, it can be flouted. And you are now pushing out to an area where we call self-help, where people can flout order of court and do what they want to do. That is what Mr. President is trying to do. And it is a wrong signal, not just to us as a nation, but to the international community, that Mr. President will come on air and give a contrary order, as it were, trying to override the order of the Supreme Court, the apex court of the land. It is wrong, and it is a wrong signal, and if that is not nipped with the bud, it can cause crisis in our country. We pray it should not come to that extent.
But I mean, one would think that the CBN itself, I mean, should be an independent body, all right. That is also to advise the president, as it were, on economic matters, and then in this case about the Naira redesigning.
Yes.
I don't know. So if the CBN is independent, and then to of course counsel the government of the day, would you say that the president has actually gone out of line? I mean, following the counsel of another independent body?
Yeah, the CBN may be independent, but issues were brought before the court on the policies and actions of the CBN. They became subject matter before the court, and as such, the court's ruling or judgment or order, as it were, is now binding on the CBN. It's equally binding on Mr. President, because federal government was, or rather, is a party to that suit, and Mr. President represents the federal government as it were. And so, because the CBN governor can advise Mr. President on what to do, there's no argument about that one. But now the issue, the advice CBN governor gave to Mr. President has led to a dispute in court. They are now bound by that order of that Supreme Court. Like I said, there are so many interpretations that have gone out to say CBN was only the party in that suit, this and this. That becomes a pedestrian argument, in the sense that a court has made a pronouncement. Okay. Like I said, rightly or wrongly now, there's a subsidiary order that must be obeyed by all and sundry. Whether the CBN is a party or not, that is an issue for that day. When the issue, when that will come, those issues will be canvassed before the court. But now, Supreme Court says, obey the order. Come before us with whatever argument you have, or whether CBN is supposed to be a party or not a party, or order was given rightly or wrongly. But for now, the order is subsisting. It has not been set aside by the same Supreme Court. So it is binding on Mr. President, it is binding on all our subjects who are parties in that suit. And a flagrant disobedience to that order portends danger for the country. And I pray that we should not get to that level.
So I mean, what do you now say to the involvement of the Attorney General of the Federation, who, of course, had to take up the matter himself? I mean, when the other the three state governors, I mean, brought the matter before the apex court. What will you say? I mean, someone who, of course, should be in your line of profession, who should understand the consequence and implication of filing another suit, all right, to counter what those three state governors brought before the apex court. How will you react to his involvement in all of this, knowing that he is a master of the law himself? Yeah,
the Attorney General of the Federation, Mr. Abubakar Malami SAN, is the chief law officer of the country. When the Supreme Court made the order, I saw his press release, which said that the federal government will abide by the order of the Supreme Court. That was for the position until the last time they went to court. You see, the three states that brought this action, Kogi State, Zamfara, and Kaduna State. Yes. From what I read from papers, I'm not a party in that suit, the documents that the Attorney General filed had to do with the issue that the Supreme Court had no jurisdiction to hear that matter as it were. He brought a preliminary objection to argue that the Supreme Court had no jurisdiction.
In other words, those three state governors, they went to the wrong place.
Yes. Okay. And that what he was saying, or what he has said, that it is when there's a dispute between states and the federal government that the original decision of the Supreme Court can be invoked. In this instance now, there is no dispute between the federal government and the states. And so he brought, and moreover, he said the CBN was not even a party to that suit. And so he brought a preliminary objection. But because of the joinder of some states to that route on the last adjourned date, that PO could not be heard. Parties were joined, it will now be adjourned to next week. I'm sure where all the issues will now be canvassed, and maybe the Philippine will now pronounce on the ruling. But meanwhile, the motion notice, other which that other was predicated, is still pending, that has not been heard. So that's where we are.
You don't, I mean, you don't see taking the matter to a wrong place as enough ground or enough reason why the president made.
No, like I said,
okay.
Like I said, another of court once made is sacrosanct. It is binding on all parties, whether wrongly or rightly. The next thing you can do when another is made and you are not satisfied, either you apply to that same court to set the other aside, canvassing your grounds under which the other should be set aside, or assuming it's a lower court, you appeal to a higher court to set the other aside. But you cannot by mere pronouncement, because the other is something in your favor. Because you are Mr. President, you are Mr. Governor. You now say no. From 200 naira should go back to circulation, 100 note, and the final note, old one, cease to be legal tender. Meanwhile, Supreme Court has said, put a halt to this policy until that motion notice is heard.
All right, so Barrister Andrew Lawan, we'll be back to you. Let's join Dr. Osaze. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay. Now, Dr. Osaze, I mean, the scarcity of the new notes and even the old notes has led to protests across the country. And as we speak now, protest is ongoing in Port Harcourt, is ongoing in Ogun. It's also broke out somewhere in Ojota in Lagos now as we speak, even though we have reports coming through that security personnel have been deployed to, forestall law and order. But quickly, how did CBN, how did they get all of this wrong? Because they say they want to mop up cash, they want to retrieve money from individuals, they want the banking system to be in charge of the monies. What is wrong with this policy?
Everything is the policy on its surface. I don't know, on a neutral ground, doing politics for me. It may sound to be nice, but it's all about the timing. IMF even gave you one that is nice, but it's about the timing and the duration, the length of time that they've put to it. You don't do your redesign of your currency in just 2 months. No, so the IMF has said, albeit a good policy, but the timing close to election, 1, then 2, the time, the duration within which we have to turn in the old currency, all this makes it hurtful to the populace. And any policy that is not formed for the people, that is not people-centered, then it's going to, you can't call it a good policy. On the point of inflation that you asked, I think without being derogatory, but I think CBN is missing a lot of things, because they seem to be looking at the inflation situation, I've said it on several programs, as a demand pull inflation. This is not demand pull inflation. It's demand pull inflation that you now start talking of dollars, that you want to mop up dollars so that it's too much money pursuing few goods. That's when you talk about dollars, demand pull inflation. But Nigeria's situation is not a demand pull inflation. So you remove the money in supply. You so much money in supply or so much money in circulation, we'll still be back to where we are, because the situation is a cost push inflation. You have issues with interest rate. You have issues with security. You have issues with insecurity. Yes, so it's not a case of it's structural issues. So you mopping up money from circulation does not solve the issue. That's why you see that we've been increasing MPR from 11.5 how many months ago, in around February, March, it's 16.5 now. Inflation still remains where it is. This same policy has been done in developed countries. You see Fed has been increasing interest rates in the last 3-4 months. You see that interest rates have been petering down. It's about 9% now. But in Nigeria's case, inflation is further increasing. So it shows that this is not a demand pull inflation. It's not a matter of increasing MPR. It's a case of insecurity, which has made food prices increase, imported inflation, because Nigeria is an import-dependent economy. So it's externalities that has caused our problem. So when we hear that the Naira redesign is going to bring down inflation, I ask how, because what does, even let's even assume that they are assuming that it's a demand pull inflation, which I've said that this is not demand pull inflation. Let's assume they are thinking it's demand pull inflation.
Yeah.
So how does too much money pursuing fuel goods, you taking money from technology? Remember, you are spending, you are transferring with your online online banking.
Yes.
You are transferring with your USS. That's money. So it's a case of there's still money. Too much money pursuing fuel goods does not necessarily mean paper money. Online money. When I see a chicken along the road, I see some, I transfer. That's still too much money pursuing fuel goods. So at the end of the day, you've not done anything by saying that you want to better inflation. Rather, from what we have been seeing, we've been seeing people exchanging 5,000 for 1,000. That's inflation, because what it means is that you've now cut down my purchasing power. You've now made the cost of obtaining money expensive. So I think all the whole policy towards driving that inflation, it's wrong. It does not, at the best, it leaves it neutral. Exchange rate is thoughtful on exchange rate. We've seen what has happened now with the exchange rate. You now see people going to the dollar market. Dollar has increased. Even in the R&D window, the official window, you now have dollars going for 441 to 461 naira to the dollar now. In the parallel market, it was around October when CBN made the pronouncement, it was about 560, 600. It went artificially by 899, and now it's 779 in the parallel. So it's pushing inflation because people are now going to alternative sources. They are now changing their naira to the dollars. So I don't know. I can't see where this policy really helps, and it worsens the fact that it's like a hurry policy, as I used in the other program, because you are giving 3 months. It's causing hardship. GDP, I fear for GDP growth for next year, because I said in the last time we met that World Bank has given suggestions to Nigeria that to grow in the next 30 years, we need to grow by double-digit GDP growth. But here we are. The last release by NBS were 2.25, and now you are having very, very strong hits, as I said, on small businesses. People are postponing transactions. I was going to Federal Girls College Road yesterday. The whole place is like a graveyard. Most stores have closed. Most stores cannot go and restock. There's so much uncertainty. They are trying to carry out transactions. I've given examples of many transactions I've done. I was driving home between 5 o'clock to 8 o'clock yesterday. I got home by 8 o'clock. This is not a journey that should take me more than an hour, because I have to stop. I do transfer. It takes me more than 30 minutes before the person confirms my transfer. I have to now drive again. I bought something. I wait another 30-45. So it's killing transactions. It's killing business. And we are going to see a very, very remarkable slowdown in GDP growth. Inflation rate we have seen has increased now from 21.34 to 21.82.
Yeah.
The artificial reduction in December was just as a result of our brothers who came from Europe and from America and so on, who injected money into circulation. In my street alone, I had about 3 people who came. One bought a new Lexus just to take himself around during the period. One was owning they were all owning generators steadily from 6 o'clock to 6 a.m. So they have injected money into circulation. Yeah, because so that's what just brought artificial. It was not because of any MPR, and we have seen the true reflection now. So all the argument that CBN has raised, we should just zero it down to it's just like trying to make an argument for where there's no. It's all political undertone. It's just politics. That's my own view about it. And as I've said, you don't use public policy to target individuals. If not, on all economic indicators, I don't see where this Naira redesign helps.
All right. Okay, Barrister.
Yes.
Okay, so the president said 200 Naira should be allowed to coexist with the new 1,500 Naira and, of course, the new 200 Naira note as well.
Yes.
But Supreme Court gave his own ruling. Who should Nigerians obey? I mean, Nigerians are confused right now. They are confused. I'm not sure there has ever been any time Nigerians have ever been so confused than now. So who should an average Nigerian out there obey? The Supreme Court? The president?
Well, it's a very complex situation, but let me say this. Even before Mr. President's pronouncement yesterday,
yes,
some banks, some individuals started rejecting the old notes.
Yeah.
Personally, I went to some area to buy. They told me, Oga Barrister, we need to take old notes again. I said, why? Even the timeline given by Supreme Court has not even expired. Now we are in a complex situation. From the pronouncement now of Mr. President, even if it's against the order of the Supreme Court, seems to be what people are obeying now. Because there is nowhere you go to now where you can present that money as legal tender. Nobody will go and send it from you to say, I want to buy pepper, I want to buy tomatoes. So it's a very common situation. That is why I said it's executive rascality. Trying to trample upon the order of the court. As Mr. President, it sends a bad signal to us as a nation and to the international community. That is a nation where orders are not obeyed. Not even the federal government, who was supposed to set a good example. So if you ask me, people are obeying Mr. President's order or pronouncement against the order of the Supreme Court. But I read these papers from states like Kaduna, Jigawa, they are saying the old Naira note of 1,500 Naira still remain legal tender in our state, pending the pronouncement of the Supreme Court. But can that be said in those states where we reside? I have not seen anything like that.
Okay, so if we have a federation with 36 states and of course an FCT, it seems as though, and then we have some states now, all right, dictating for their citizens who to obey their own law in their own states. And then there is a court ruling in Abuja. There is a pronouncement in Abuja by the #1 citizen in the country. Where is all of this leading to?
That is why I said from the onset that the pronouncement by Mr. President, if it is not handled carefully, can lead to anarchy.
Are we there already?
Well, we are there to a small extent. Let me use that word, because where Kaduna, Kogi, Jigawa, and so even Kano, some states not are saying, as far as they are concerned, the legal tender still remains the old money, 1,500. It seems only the South here we are obeying the order of Mr. President against the order of the Supreme Court. So it has to be handled carefully. And the earlier it is done, the better. Because a hungry man most times can go beyond his senses. Like what we saw what happened within the week in Benin. Though I don't support what happened, but it was out of frustration. The destruction was uncalled for. But we must try to avoid a further deterioration of the crisis that we are finding ourselves now. If I were Mr. President, I would come on air again. If I were him, to apologize to the nation and to say they should obey the order of the Supreme Court, pending a further pronouncement for that Supreme Court. Because it's the apex court of the land, we must obey court orders. What Mr. President has done sends wrong signal to everybody, and it's not good for us. It's not good. Our elections are just 3 days away. I read in the papers yesterday that INEC complained that they are not even receiving cash for the election that's about how many hours from now. So we are putting ourselves in a very tight situation. And there are insinuations that there are plans to install interim government by this crisis. Who do we believe? I pray that God will help us.
Well, we will not work with that. I mean, that's not something we can actually approve. So quickly, Dr. Saze, Dr. Saze, can you hear me? Dr. Saze, are you there?
Yeah, I'm with you.
Okay.
I'm with you.
So now, the scarcity of the new notes and, of course, the old notes, in other words, lack of cash, people don't have money to spend, has led to people, taking laws into their own hands. It's not, we don't support that, and we don't buy the idea at all. We, of course, in every entirety, we are, of course, against that move. Now, that has led to people, destroying properties, not just public infrastructure. Banks' ATM machines were destroyed. Point on sales operators, business owners got their properties destroyed as well. Now, for the banks, they had a meeting. I think that was 2 days ago. No, that was after the protest, right? And they said they lost up to 50 billion naira. That was the amount that they said they lost as to these protests. That's one of the consequences of the lack of cash to make use of. So I don't know, and I've been asking and been pondering. So who pays for that? The 50 billion naira that the banks have lost, who will pay for that? Who will be responsible for the reorganizing of those structures back to life so that they can start serving the populace?
Yes, so it boils down to what I was saying, that it's going to hit on GDP figures. It's going to hit on economic activity, because the service sector has been one of the most, in fact, it has been the sector that has been bailing the country out in terms of contribution to GDP. Insurance, banking, telecoms. So now we have seen this hit. Figure has been given at 50 billion. So I've heard people say, okay, yes, I saw banks, I saw this GTB Act to Solution, I saw, without mentioning it, I saw ATMs destroyed. But I was talking to my cousin who works in the bank, and he was saying just one machine is not less than 5-6 million naira. So we are talking of banks that were 4-5 ATMs were destroyed. We are talking of running into millions. Probably, if we are running an estimate of 5 million for one ATM, we're talking about 5 ATM like 25 million. So I've heard people say yes, they've got insurance cover, but the insurance sector is also part of the service sector. So one of the sectors will be losing. Either the insurance sector giving to the bank, the insurance sector is losing. So we are going to see hits on GDP figures next year. And it's worrying. And also this is also part of inflation too, because these machines are going to be imported. We don't make ATM machines here, and we need forex. So it's going to also push down, it's going to worsen the forex problem. It's going to heighten inflation. So I think it's condemnable, the actions of the protesters. Just that the lawyer said, you don't have to push the people. So that's why I said politics has now been put above the economy, because this is going to be a massive hit on the economy. We are seeing GDP figures, and it's a worry. For me, I still ask the question: what was the motive behind it? Because when I checked the figures on MPS, cash to GDP ratio, Nigeria cash to GDP ratio was about 2% in 2007. Yeah, 2007. By 2021, it had gone to 1.67. These are verifiable. Cash to GDP. In UK, cash to GDP currently is about 5%. In US, it's 7.5%.
Yes.
In Japan, it's 20%. In China, it's about 9.5%. So Nigeria, 1.6%. That's laudable. So you ask yourself, what was now the point for the policy in the first place? If Nigeria's cash to GDP ratio is 1.67, and a big economy like US is 7.5, so it means that US economy is even handling more cash than us. They are the owners. When you go to US, when you see we have people there, you see ATM machines, teller points or ATM points. In fact, less than 1 minute walk, you see one machine to the other. So that's why I say it's all mischief, and it's unfortunate that we have put politics beyond the economy in this case, and the country is now paying for it, and it's unfortunate. First of all, I think, as I said before, the CBN governor, the management have to come and apologize to Nigeria, but this is election year, and politicians we place everything above economy, above everything. It's just about vendetta. People are trying to get back at political enemies. So, but I think for the economy, I can't see any way that this policy helps us. If you really have a genuine case to say you want to redesign the policy, then there's nothing wrong in saying 2 years. 2 years, you take it gently, just like we did with our polymers and our 15 naira, 20 naira, 10 naira.
Yes.
Then you take it gently, just like in UK is happening now. You're having currencies being changed till 2024. So I think in Nigeria's situation, we have placed politics above economy, and is the price that is being paid for currently. Yeah.
Do you think the CBN can do something like a damage control?
At this point, I think it's late. The only damage control that we can see is what I said the last time when we were on the program, on another program. Yes. I said that CBN, the only solution is to allow the old and the new notes to coexist. But I also added that I know they won't do that because they had postponed it before. So they are trying to ego will come into play right now. And I think there's a game plan. There's a target which they are trying to achieve. So I don't see that. I don't see any damage control as at this period. The economy has been pushed to the wall. The only damage control is to print more currency. And CBN currently, I dare say, I don't think they even know how much is currently in circulation right now, both the new and the old notes. So they are skeptic in adding to the new notes. to adding currency into circulation. And we heard that they have the capacity that the printing and minting corporation has is 200 billion a month. So it shows that it's still not something. So this just shows lack of planning. So if it's something, I think the idea beyond that 200 billion was that if we are going to allow currency to circulate in a year, just like UK is doing from 2023 to 2022 to 2024, so at 200 billion every month, in 12 months, they'll be able to do about 1.2 trillion. But because it's a ad hoc, just want to do it in 3 months, so they can't even mix the new prints that is needed. So I don't see any damage control, and I accept that they should allow the new and the old notes run concurrent, just like we have been doing in the past with our 50 naira, with our 10 naira, 20 naira. But if that is not done, I think Nigerians are just going to be pushed to the wall. Welfare is going to be put beneath politics, and just as it is with Nigerians, we'll just always complain, and the government will always have to be at the end of it.
Barrister Andrew Lawani, where do we go from here now? With what is on the ground, where do we go in all of this now? Even though, yes, you talked earlier about the fact that, Nigerians don't really know. In some part of the country, they are obeying their governors. Some parts, they seem to be following the president. We don't know the part that is following the Supreme Court.
Yes, if I have to offer my sincere advice, like Dr. Yoha said, they should allow the old notes and the new notes coexist concurrently.
All the notes, all the denominations.
All the denominations. Pending when this crisis will reduce. You see, people are suffering. I got the truth.
Would that not defeat the purpose of trying to mop up cash?
You ask again, what was really the purpose? The changing currency in Britain now is about 2 years plan. If they had buying of votes in mind, then this policy ought to have come earlier than this. Maybe 6 or 7 months ago. So they can print 200 billion every month and have more money in stock. As I speak to you, I don't have to 500 naira in my pocket. I have money. There's no ATM to withdraw the money. You think everybody can bear it? So they should allow the old notes and the new notes, first my advice, my opinion, to reduce the tension in the air to coexist. But because of the country that we are, there's a target, like my brother said, there's a target. They had a purpose in mind why they hastily brought this policy that has caused untold hardship on us. So that's
Not
it.
many of us can actually prove that. Because we are seeing the effect that the policy is also bringing to bear. Dr. Yowa, just before I let you go, I know you are not in a very comfortable environment there. A quick one, Dr. Yowa. I want to ask you now, for those infrastructures of the banks that have been destroyed that we talked about earlier. All right. Now, the president has asked the banks or the CBN, of course, and now the CBN telling the banks to, of course, inject the old 200 naira notes into circulation, of course, to run side by side with the new notes. I don't know. The banks have their properties destroyed. How can this be achieved?
Yes, the banks have to, as I said, for those who have insurance, the insurance sector would make amends or provide for those infrastructure that are destroyed. But as I said, it's still going to be a drain on the services sector. It's going to affect the profits and loss accounts, because the profits that would have been declared by these insurance companies, their turnaround, everything that is going to be at the end of the year is going to still be a hit on the insurance sector, which is a subset of the services sector. The 200 naira notes that is the president has been asked to, 200 naira has been the least circulated of all the notes. So I don't see how that helps. We are still back to base, to basis, because I was telling somebody, I said, with this hoarding, they say hoarding festers in a situation of scarcity. The CBN literally turned the people against the banks. When we saw them going to bank vaults, trying to bring out, even if you are doing something, why do you have to carry camera phones to now show people hiding banknotes, old new notes behind banks? So it was like CBN was turning the people against the banks, taking attention. That's why you saw this uproar against the banks. So I think I was telling you, I said, because of this scarcity, no matter how much CBN puts into this economy, even if CBN puts 2 trillion into this Nigeria economy, it will swallow it. Because there are people now who are now wanting to hoard. Hoarding is now like the other. If there's so much money, you are not going to hoard. So even if the CBN is bringing 200 naira notes back, I can tell you that if those old notes are released, it's going to be swallowed. You won't see it in the economy because of hoarding. You will still have those bank managers or whoever who is dealing with those who need the currency. Imagine if 200 naira notes, a bank manager in one organization, I'm not calling it, maybe one institution, a federal institution in Benin or a federal place in Benin, and you heard the head of the institution, yes, that so and so money has been brought. He and the management staff are going to divide 80% first before it now start going into the ATM. So we are back to basis. Our lives might never be back to how it was. Life has been distorted. Our life activities have been distorted. It has had psychological impact. Even the rural dwellers have had their act of this. Business in the village market is in tatters because they don't have POS, they don't have banks, they don't have ATM. So you go there, you want to buy gari from village market, you want to buy yams, because they don't have POS and you don't have cash. You are looking at the thing and you can't buy. So it's going to have cost. So as I said, 200 naira in circulation does not solve anything. We are still where we are for simple reasons that 200 naira is one of the least circulated, and I don't think CBN is thinking of printing. And no matter how much you put into the economy now, because cash is still not available. To be swallowed, hoarding will continue to fester. So I don't know. CBN is just trying to scratch the surface. The real solution is let all the currencies move concurrently together. Then if you have problem with vote buying, deploy EFCC on the election day. People should be held accountable. When you see somebody, it's not spirits who buy this vote. That's why we should have our law enforcement agencies picking on these people. Anybody who you see selling, buying vote, you pick the person and you arrest him. That's why we spend billions on EFCC, billions on ICPC every month, not to use public policy to put people frustrated. That's my thing.
All right, Dr. Saze, you are always amazing whenever you join us on the show, economic analyst. Thank you for coming through this afternoon.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Barrister Andrew Lawani, I mean, well, I mean, the expose that you gave us,
yes,
you know, has helped us to have a better understanding of what these issues are. And we, just like you have cancelled, I mean, we have to wait and see what happens when eventually the Supreme Court will meet next week. All right, that's the show, Business This Week. My name is Dennis Ofik. Next week, Friday, we have another talking point. Until then, have an amazing weekend.